This week saw the release of the second part of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry's report. It deals with Transnet as well as Denel, and former Public Enterprises Minister Malusi Gigaba, CEO Brian Molefe, as well as acting CEO Siyabonga, Gama, as well as CFO at the time. Anoj Singh's names feature highly in the over 500 pages that are dedicated to Transnet. Now it says that they were the enablers of state capture at the entity. Let's look at the second part of the report with Professor Barry Hanyane. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, Transnet was always going to be very interesting, especially when you look at the amounts of money that have been involved here. I know that there's been a lot of talk around SSA and all of that, but when you look at Transnet, you can really see it lays bare just how the capture really was happening in that particular institution. I wonder, when you were going through it, if it lived up to your expectations?
Good evening to your viewers. No, absolutely. Although one would anticipate that the crux of the matter will eventually come out in the third installment, which I suspect will be much more comprehensive. Be that as it may, it confirms one thing, that whatever was inherited in 1994, surely from a state company perspective, most of them were highly financed. These were institutions that had healthy liquidity, and Transnet was at the center of that basket of companies that were owned by government, still owned, of course. So what did the pariah state, under those who enabled the state capture to happen, as well as the main beneficiaries, do? They went for the big fish. They made sure that Transnet becomes the cash cow of their pockets. And indeed, whoever was appointed there needed to get the blessings of these persons who had the state by this the control of the neck. And in a sense, those appointments were facilitated. Not only that, but transactions as well, which amounted to millions of rands that not only were taken here locally, but also invested abroad.
Listening to you, you've just alluded to my next question, because when one reads the report, it is clear that, state capture was very well orchestrated and doesn't just start with the tender and the contract in and itself, but it was critical because the kind of appointment that would be made at the helm, with being the minister who would have to be the oversight head in this particular instant, as well as the CEO of the entity and the boards, were done in such a way that it prepares the ground for the tender, that should it be out, they know exactly where it should go.
Absolutely, Bongiwe. It's more of how the concept of renting, which is part of the vocabulary of state capture, gets to be manifested in the real world, where through confidence, through clandestine networks, through some kind of use of force. Take note of the contributions made by your whistleblowers, people like Maseko and others, who unfortunately in their majority were either purged or victimized in one way or another, but hang on to the truth and were able to survive and tell the world what state capture a la South Africa chapter or version was all about. And here we are today. We are woken up by the South African reality that sadly we have exported to the world, to say this is our corruption based on a South African label. And in a sense, unfortunately, the taxpayers' money is at the center of it all. Not only that, Denel today struggling to pay its staff, and of course, keeping afloat from a financial point of view, liquidity almost vanished. Here is a state-owned company that could have flourished, that could have brought millions of rands in this country, especially in countries like Middle East, where there is always some skirmishes of sorts. Surely the sale of arms could have brought so much to its coffers, and by extension contributed to our national fiscus. So there's an opportunity lost there, which is a second point. But the third point is obviously the erosion of state governance as we know it, or as we expected it to be maintained. It is sad that so much has been lost: energy, focus, programs, and by extension, certain jobs will be lost in the near future. And it's going to take us time to recover from this mess.
And I want to get to some of the recommendations in just a moment, especially after what you've said around the appointment of some of these people critical to lead these entities. But I want us to zoom into, some of the individuals that were said to be at play, especially when it comes to Transnet, around former Enterprises Minister Malusi, Gigaba, Anoj, Singh, former CEO Brian Molefe, as well as former acting CEO Siyabonga, Gama. I was very interested to see the former Public Enterprises Minister take to Twitter and respond immediately after the report was released, saying that 3 years and 1 billion rand later, DCJ Raymond Zondo has found no evidence to warrant a recommendation that I be charged with corruption. Instead of clearing me, he asks that I be investigated some more in the hope that this will kill me politically. If only he and his handlers knew. And when you read the report, it also talks about these matters being referred for possible prosecution, because the report does seem to think that there's more at play here, and law enforcement authorities must come into play. I wonder what you make of a response like this one.
Bongi, I had a chance to look at the thread itself, and it's quite interesting that he somewhat bent his fingers because there was an immediate backlash. Nobody was sympathetic to that tweet. And in a sense, a lot of people were pointing a finger at him to say, you are an enabler. We now know your role. It might not necessarily give us that privilege of having access to prima facie evidence in totality, but the front door is open for that. And in a country like ours, where if a law enforcement agency like the Hawks, including the NPA by extension, fails to reach that prosecutorial level, I'm including the Hawks because they are important in investigation, but NPA driving the prosecution process. Let's not forget, those who have interest in the matter can still apply for private prosecution. So the room to escape prosecution in the end is limited. And I'm afraid those who have been singled out are in for a long slog. And as we all know, the might of the law might take time, but there is energy there. It might take years, but eventually justice must be seen to be done.
Justice seen to be done, Prof. I mean, one of the things that the report recommends is that the boards and senior positions in state-owned entities should not be left only to politicians, because it appears as if this has failed. But one of the things I'm very interested in, because against the backdrop of these two reports are the Guptas, and they're still not in South Africa. So what kind of justice can South Africans expect if they still are not in South Africa to be able to answer to some of the allegations that are even contained in this report, let alone having not been in the State Capture Commission?
I would anticipate and perhaps prefer that as society we put pressure where it is supposed to be, and that is the ministry under Mr. Damula, to say, you got to office, you got everybody excited to say there could be an extradition treaty here in the offering. What happened to that promise? If we could start there and make sure that wherever this family is hiding, some kind of agreement is put in place. I'm happy that some countries like the UK, for instance, have taken a step forward to say, despite the fact that there is a delay in terms of extradition, what we're going to do is we're obviously going to sanction this family, either through an embargo of sorts, freezing of assets, and other punitive measures. So it's interesting to see that the global community is on our side. Why not once again, as a second level, put pressure there? Pressure in a friendly way that says, please, people, watch out for these individuals. They have a case to answer in South Africa. Be on our side, because tomorrow it might affect you. You have people like Lord Hayne in the UK, for instance, who has contributed immensely to be on the side of South Africa. And it is such people that we need to laud them and thank them, and obviously anticipate that more will come from them. And let's take that and use it to the benefit of South Africans.
All right, Prof, thank you so much for your time. And I do hope that the next time we speak, we'll even talk about some of the political developments, especially we see now that the ANC will be summoning Minister Lindiwe Sisulu to appear before the Integrity Commission. But thank you so much for your time.